It was actually pretty straightforward once I had the proof I'd been looking for. I'd had this feeling that something wasn't right with my second wife, but I couldn't put my finger on it. You know that feeling when something isn't right but you can't say for a fact what it might be? Well, I've always felt it was some subconscious part of your brain that picks up on stray facts until it finds a pattern and then tries to tell your conscious mind something isn't right. I've discussed these things endlessly, citing hunches and a woman's intuition as examples. I had 4 children with my first wife. They were all good people with successful careers and stable families. They've been a tremendous help to me at times, especially after their mother died. We clung together like survivors of a plane crash, becoming even closer. They were all married or in college by the time I married Ellen. She was younger by almost 11. We got on really well. She had the same values and the same goals. She was smoking hot in bed. She wasn't a beauty, but she was very attractive. She was 5 feet 5 inches, 36-26-38, with a nice figure and brown eyes and a mane of auburn hair that flowed onto her shoulders. She exercised a lot and loved compliments. My kids accepted her, but they never really bonded. They were all adults and, if they didn't love her, they didn't hate her. As long as I was happy, they were happy. We'd been married for about 6 years when I got that prickly feeling that something was off. I was 55, and she was 46. I caught her in a few small lies, nothing serious until you added them all up. Finally, I couldn't shake off my unease and went to see my oldest friend. Melody was an attractive woman in her mid. Mel was in her 30s with an accountant husband and 2 girls who loved seeing Grandpa. She looked like an accountant too, but appearances can be deceptive. This kept her busy and fattened their bank account. Mel owned one of the most successful private investigation firms in the Southeast. She had 2 degrees, one in computers and one in psychology. She was a walking lie detector, analyzing body language and voice inflections. It was hard to catch her off guard. She had 5 offices and as many tech wizards as detectives. One of her tactics was hiring older ex-cops, both men and women, and young geeky-looking kids who notice a geek with a laptop or a grandma out for a morning stroll. Not many of her tricks are worth measuring by her bank account. I gave her the money to start her business. It was part of the insurance I got from her mother's passing. She tried to pay me back, but she didn't succeed. She backed down a few times, but gave up when I told her she had to stop attending family functions with me unless she dropped the issue. She didn't seem shocked when I brought up my concerns. "It's probably nothing," she said. "Or maybe it's just your imagination." It was just platitudes. "I'll look into it." I did look into it for 2 weeks before she asked me to stop by her office on the way home. I had an office downtown near hers. I was the consultant. The guy you hired to tell you how to save your company is a real shame. The sad part of my business is that most of what I tell them they already knew, they just needed somebody they paid an obscene amount of money to for reassurance. Sometimes part of my responsibility was to be the bad guy. I didn't like it, but most of the people I let go needed firing and knew it. Others were completely surprised. She threw the folder on the desk when I walked in. Our neighbor, 34 year, he was an older married man with 2 children. He was unemployed and spent his time while his wife was at work and the kids were at school, relieving tensions with my wife in all sorts of positions in all sorts of places. There were pictures of him and her on my couch, in my washing machine, in my dining room, in my backyard, and even one of them kneeling in front of the while my wife sat on the swing rocking back and forth. The kids played on the swing. I couldn't understand why he didn't like beds. Mel watched me closely, knowing me well. "Don't do anything stupid," she said. "Just dump her and move on with your life. She can't take anything from you. The prenup took care of that. I know you. I inherited my quick mind from you. If you think of something, I'm here for you. Don't do it." It was too late, but I thanked her for her advice. She looked at my eyes and picked up the phone. "I'm calling Junior. He needs to know anyway, he's your lawyer after all. Maybe he'll talk you out of whatever you've got planned." That led me to the den of my oldest son. Mel sent me some of the photos. I've already started the paperwork you need. Dad, I need you to stay calm and let me handle it. When can you make it happen? It's Tuesday, so I'll file tomorrow. I'll get in touch with a few people and have her served wherever and whenever you want. Are you going home on Friday? Yeah, I'll make nice for 2 days. I guess she doesn't pay much attention to me lately. She'll never notice anything. He got up and stood next to me as I was leaving. He put his hand on my arm and said, "Don't do it, Dad. Do what I asked. Whatever it is you've got planned, I can see it in your eyes." I told him I wasn't going to do something stupid. I found out later I wasn't at my car before he called his friend, Dave, who is one of the most successful defense lawyers in the state. "Schedule flexible, I may have to use you shortly." Turns out she didn't notice a thing. "What can I fix you up with?" He was my wild child, covered in tattoos and piercings. He'd never been in trouble his whole life. He'd inherited his mother's wicked sense of humor and my sense of right and wrong. He could have studied anything he wanted in college, but he took his lifelong fascination with weapons and built it into a very lucrative business. I gave him the same support I gave my other kids. I gave him some money to get started. He was a master gunsmith with a loyal following. He made custom weapons for SWAT teams. He guaranteed their sniper rifles would hit at 350 yards. You could cover the first 3 shots with a quarter, then the next 3 with a 50. He was a master gunsmith with a cult following. He specialized in SWAT weapons and could guarantee hits at 350 yards. He did all the work for the 3 largest cities around as well as most of the local SBI and FBI work. He also had a very profitable gun shop and a police equipment supply line. Thanks to him and the family, I had plenty of weapons. We often shot together on a 20-acre piece of land I owned. Out in the country, we'd converted a barn into a gun range. He had all his weapons there. He was married, which I didn't think would ever happen. She owned her own tattoo shop and was very talented. Her work appeared regularly in magazines. I was instantly attracted to her. I liked her quite a bit. I picked up a few new items he showed me. I never knew when I might find them useful on the way home. I got a call from my youngest daughter, who is a nurse practitioner and a partner in her office. She said, "Dad, are you okay? Are you not going to do anything stupid?" I smiled. I could see her frowning over the phone, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not going to mess up and miss my newest grandchild's birth. Not a chance. I could use a few sleeping pills. The last few days I haven't been able to sleep. I got a prescription from her right after her mother died. I couldn't sleep because I was grieving. I didn't take them long. They were very strong over the years, especially if I was working with a company I knew wouldn't make it, and I was really stressed about it. She would only prescribe a week's worth, and sometimes she just gave me samples after warning me again. She promised to call and a prescription to the pharmacy on Thursday night. I sat down to a nice dinner with my wife, and we had a pleasant conversation. I opened a bottle of wine, one from a local vineyard I knew she loved. I had picked it up that day. I poured her a glass as we relaxed after our meal. I don't like wine, which she well knew, so she wasn't surprised when I opened a beer when her glass went empty. I poured her another. I got her a second beer about halfway through the second glass. She was nodding off, so I took the glass out of her hands. I told her, "You seem sleepy. Why don't you lie back on the couch and relax? I'll put some music on and clean up the kitchen." She mumbled something that sounded like, "Thank you," and started snoring. I cleaned the kitchen and made 2 phone calls. The first call was pretty quick, but the second one took a little longer. "Sandy, how are you? Did Barry get a job yet?" "Well, I may have something for him. I'm meeting this guy at his factory to observe his second shift capabilities. Why not have him come over and ride with me? He needs a night operations manager pretty badly. The pay is in the mid, he's in his late 40s, so I think he might be interested. Let's see." "Great. Have him come over in about 30 minutes. I made a note to toss the burner phone as soon as I could and went outside to wait. I had a mid-90s GMC truck that I hardly ever drove. It came with a slimline bed cover that I removed immediately. What use is a truck if you can't use it to haul stuff earlier that day? I put it back on a few minutes later. Barry strolled up, thanked me for my help and talked about how much he liked my wife and me. No problem. Barry, what are neighbors for? Before we go, could you look? Could you check if I've got the bolts on this thing right? My car is in the garage and she doesn't like it when I drive hers. I'd hate for this thing to fly off as we go down the road. I had the cover lit up and the tailgate down. He leaned over to check the bolts when I hit him with the stun gun. He quivered, made a sighing sound and went out like a light. I shoved him the rest of the way, closed the tailgate and lid and left. I drove for about 5 minutes before pulling off at a secluded spot. He was just coming around when I zapped him again, this time taking the opportunity to put the handcuffs and lead shackles on. I drove out to our gun range. It took about 30 minutes, 10 minutes on a dirt road that was so neglected it looked like a goat path. I probably went a little too fast and hit a few of the bumps a little hard. I must have. I was angry, so I unlocked the gate and drove through. As I was relocking it, I could hear him yelling and thumping around. I made a mental note to remember the gag on the way back. I bounced on out to the range. I didn't realize how rough the road was, but then again I had never driven it that fast before. He started yelling as soon as I opened the tailgate. I grabbed him by the leg restraints and pulled him out. He made a thumping sound as he hit the ground. He opened his mouth to complain, and I shoved the barrel of my Judge in. Just so you know, a Judge is a revolver that can fire 45s or 410 shotgun shells. He fell silent, so I continued. I'm going to let you up. You're going to walk over to that bench and sit down. Stay there. Don't move or speak unless I tell you to. He nodded his head as best he could around the barrel in his mouth. I might have chipped a tooth when I pulled it out, but I couldn't be sure if I did. He didn't complain as he couldn't get his balance. I lost patience, so I had him crawl over with a little encouragement. I gave him a little encouragement with a kick to the backside now and then. I also gave him a verbal pep talk. This is a Judge revolver, just so you know. I have it loaded with 410 shotgun shells. The number 4 shot is about the same size as a BB, maybe just a little bigger. It won't kill you unless I hit you just right, but it'll hurt like hell if I empty it into you. You'll bleed out even if I don't hit anything major. With me here, Barry, he nodded, tears running down his face. I sat him up on the bench and strapped him down with 36-. I tied him up with zip ties to keep him still, but he tried to scream. I put a ball gag in his mouth and tightened it. My daughter-in-law sells sex toys as a side job, and I got it from her. It led to some interesting dinner conversations with my daughters and daughters-in-law. Once every 3 or 4 months, a few select friends would get together to look over the latest merchandise. It always led to some very happy husbands. I pulled up a camp chair and sat in front of him. I could see the tracks of his tears in the light of the full moon. Why are we here, Barry? I know why we're here, Barry. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to lie to you. Think about it, Barry. What could possibly motivate a nice guy like me to do this to anybody? Think about it. Sometimes severe emotional trauma causes people to snap. It's clear that trauma is a factor here. What kind of trauma could make people snap? The death of a child, the loss of a job, abandonment of loved ones. I think I've got it. How about infidelity? Many a man has been driven over the edge by having his wife betray him. Many seek revenge. Pain and sadness for everyone involved, and the collateral damage. Divorce, loss of children. It just gets uglier and uglier. What do you think, Barry? Got any comments? No, silly me. Here, let me. I've got to help you. I ripped the gag off, taking a little scalp with it. There, now we can talk like civilized people. It's your turn, Barry. I've monopolized the conversation enough, don't you think? Speak up. I practically screamed at him the last time. He was sobbing. I'm sorry, really sorry, but she came on to me. The slap rang in the night. Did it matter who came on to the other? Did her coming on make her any less married? Did it make you either of you any less responsible? I turned away, but you didn't. Did you think what I was about to do was worth it? He was crying, almost incoherent. I shone the beam of the flashlight in his eyes. This is what got you, Barry. It's a fully functioning flashlight with a stun gun built in. You just shove it hard against someone and the prongs come out and zap them like a taser. That's what I hear anyway. My youngest son gave it to me. I stood up and walked around him. I checked his bonds and stopped suddenly in front of him. I pulled a bag off the truck seat and got some toys for us to play with. Barry, this is going to be fun, isn't it? Look at this. I pulled out a pair of heavy-duty shears and snicked them at him a few times. He freaked out when I started cutting his pants off. He was moving around until I reminded him that if he didn't stay still, accidents could happen. I tossed the pants aside and eyed him. Damn, Barry. I expected more. It's hard to believe that little. The thing is, it's causing you so much grief, right? My oldest daughter owns a private investigation company. It's quite good, I hear. I held up a sheath of papers and shook my head. Barry, Mrs. Oliver, she must be 60 or better, and Mrs. Grant, she can't be more than 25, and weighs at least 250. You don't call much, do you, and Mrs. Jeff? I thought you hated black people, but it's good to see you've overcome your prejudice. Her husband must be what, 65? I bet he weighs close to 300. Surprisingly. I thought prison guards would be a bit more fit. You've certainly been busy in the neighborhood, haven't you? Do you have anything left over for that sweet wife of yours? Remember her? She's the one who gave you 2 children and is working all the overtime she can get to keep your sorry ass up. I bet it would break her heart to see these pictures. Don't you worry, Barry. I'll be sure to offer. I'll help her and the kids any way I can. When you lose the house, I might let her and the kids move in with me. You do know that Mrs. Oliver's son is the vice president in charge of mortgages for your bank, don't you? You never got along in school, if I remember right. I'll console her as best I can. Maybe she'll be really grateful. There might be snow on my roof, but there's still fire in my stove. Thank goodness. I like kids, so it would be a win-win. Win for us. Heck, I might even adopt them. You wouldn't mind, would you? He was slumped over, so I patted his cheeks a couple of times, then slapped him. He jerked back, good. I was afraid you were taking a nap. We have a lot to do, so don't get slack. We need to make some choices. Barry, I want you to think about this. I'll give you a minute to think about it, but Barry, I'd like a decision before we leave. I reached into the bag and pulled out something that had handles like pliers but had 3 prongs in front. Can you guess what this is? It's a bull bander, it's for castrating. This is the device you use. I held up a rubber band that was only about an inch wide and put it on like this. I put the band over the 3 prongs and squeezed the handle. The prongs immediately spread the band by about 4 inches. What you do is take the bull calf by the scrotum, and when you release the handle, the band pops off and constricts the scrotum. It's supposed to be very painful at first, but the calf goes numb after about a week. The testicles no longer work after about a week and a half, and the scrotum drops off after about 2 weeks. It's quick and almost painless. It's quite invasive, but it's perfect. I should mention that my youngest daughter's husband owns a beef operation with his father. He looked terrified. I held up a bottle of pills, which I got from my youngest daughter. It's actually for animals, specifically oversexed male dogs and the pounds. One of these makes a dog. It'll last about a week if you use it twice, or a month if you use it 3 times or more. The effects aren't reversible, though. I'd say you need to use 6 for your weight. He was sobbing hard and fast. I held his head up and showed him some drawings and something that resembled a gun. One of my daughters. My in-law gave me this tattoo gun. All I have to do is hold these drawings to you and follow the lines. Do you prefer blue or black ink? I had the truck headlights on so he could plainly see the drawings. I held up one, and it was a life. I've got a great idea for a tattoo. It's a detailed drawing of a penis. It goes across your cheek with the head on the edge of your lips. I've also got another one that says I love to go across your forehead. I think it will make you popular with the ladies. I sat back inside. Well, there you go, Barry. Pick one if you don't. I'll probably do all of them to you. Oops, I forgot one. I forgot one more thing. I held up even more papers. My oldest son is a lawyer, and these are alienation of affection suits, which are legal in this state. There's one for me, one for Mr. Jeff, and one for Mr. Grant. Mrs. Oliver is a widow, but she's named as a witness. You can pick that one if you want. I'm going to go get a beer while you think. I'd offer you one, but I want you to be clear. I'll be back in a bit, so you better have an answer for me. I walked off into the dark and found a log to sit on. I listened to the night sounds. An owl hooted, coyotes howled on the ridge, and tree frogs sang in the wetland. It was peaceful. He was slumped over when I got back, and he'd apparently cried out. I shook him roughly. What's it to be, Barry? I have a couple of favorites myself. I hope you refuse to pick one so I can have a little fun. He begged and pleaded. I yawned. Time's up, Barry. I'm going to enjoy this, you probably won't. I held up the ball bander. This won't hurt for long. Let me know if you want to watch. I think you might. I pulled a leather mask out of the bag and bound it to his head, leaving just his nose exposed. I replaced the castrating band with a regular heavy-duty rubber band. I heard him scream when it snapped home. It would be uncomfortable, but it wouldn't do any long-term damage. If it was removed within 24 hours, there would be long-term damage. I got out the bottle of pills. They were estrogen pills that were left over from a hormone replacement treatment that my soon-to-be ex had. My wife wanted to make her skin look younger. The pills would only make his nipples sore for a day or two and maybe make mood swings worse. I got a bottle of water and put 5 pills in my hand. I unzipped the front of the mask and held his nose shut. He opened his mouth to scream, so I shoved. I popped the pills into his mouth and pushed the water bottle down his throat. He gagged and spat, but eventually swallowed them. I was humming to myself when I heard a voice come out of the darkness. That's enough, Dad. I think you made your point. We'll handle it from here. All 4 of my children came into the light, along with one son, my in-law, and one daughter-in-law. How did you know? I asked, surprised. Mel laughed. You're so predictable. I had 2 people on you since it started. I wanted to stop you sooner, but I got outvoted. They wanted to let you have a little fun. You're a scary man. You know that? Go on home. You've got other problems to deal with. We got his. I bowed to their wisdom and left. I had called to say that I'd died just after I zapped Barry. I told her I had to leave because I couldn't wait any longer. I actually did have an appointment, but I ran late and called to cancel. She didn't know where he could be. He came home 4 hours later, brought home by the police. He said he had been forced into a car, mugged, beaten, and left on the side of the road. The police believed it was a disgruntled husband or group of husbands. I had half the police were easily convinced of my alibi. My wife had passed out and couldn't say exactly when I came home. I'll never forget her scream the next morning when she went to take a shower. Her pubic hair had been shaved off, and an intricate tattoo was in place, proudly saying Barry swiped across. Her hairless mound wasn't a real tattoo, but one drawn on with an ink tattoo. Artists were experimenting with it. It was guaranteed to last 3 months. It was used for people who weren't sure they wanted a real one. If they changed their mind, the ink would wear off, and no harm was done. My daughter. In the law was above suspicion. My daughter-in-law and the rest of the family were seen by many witnesses dining out at a local restaurant. It hypothetically may have been done by a fellow artist who was moving out of town and could use a little extra money. It was just a wild supposition. I was on my way out the door for a short vacation when she screamed after leaving the photos and a no-fault divorce decree on the dining room table with a note saying to sign and I would help her get set up in an apartment. She moved into an apartment and paid her expenses for 3 months while she looked for a job. If I didn't sign, I would leave her out in the cold after a very public divorce. She signed and lived across town for a while, then met and married a man 4 years her junior. I guess the older man thing didn't work as well for her. They moved directly after the ceremony to Alaska. I never asked why she decided to cheat. In fact, I spoke to her again, and the lawyers handled everything. Photos showed up in various mailboxes in the neighborhood. Sandy kicked Barry out, and he took off for parts unknown just ahead of Mr. Jeff and Mr. Grant. After the dust settled, I managed to track him down so that the divorce papers could be served and child support established. I heard it's a strain for him to pay the mandated amount of support and live a decent life, but as long as he pays, nobody really cares. I unofficially adopted Sandy as another child, indeed, giving her a shoulder to cry on. Sandy was like another child to me, so I talked to Mr. Oliver and got her mortgage renegotiated. He was really understanding, so much so that 11 months later I kept the boys with me while they honeymooned. His wedding gift to her was the paid note on her house. The boys got a little sister 2 years later. Mr. Jeff divorced his wife, as did Mr. Grant. Mrs. Jeff moved across town and spent the next 3 years trying to reconcile. He finally started talking to her. And she moved back into the neighborhood. They haven't remarried yet. Mrs. Grant didn't have anywhere to go, as she was from out of state. I saw her walking down the road with a single suitcase, crying. I felt responsible, so I took her home and put her in a spare B bedroom. She took over my household, keeping it spotless. It turns out she had a good head for business, so now she runs the home office as well. I bought us a gym membership, and while I toned up, she lost over 11. She became very attractive. Men were all over her until she made it clear she wasn't looking for another partner. The one she had was more than enough. After she lost the first 50 pounds, she surprised me by waking me in the middle of the night by bouncing on my bed. I think it was a test. I had no idea what she was talking about until she was naked. I've been wanting to do this forever, but was afraid the bed wouldn't support both of us. Now move over. I always sleep on the right side, and so does she. My kids thought it was hilarious when she announced at Thanksgiving that we were going to start a family. I tried to talk her out of it, but she said I was about 6 weeks too late. I did the right thing and married her. All 4 of my kids had a long talk with her about my views on fidelity. I think it may have scared her. It turns out her husband was cheating on her and she was doing Barry strictly for revenge. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. I think he had evidence and she didn't. Our daughter was born about 3 days before my 5th grandchild. I was 10 days shy of my 58th birthday. I figured it out. I'll be 80 when she graduates from college. The kids recently had a Halloween party and insisted we come. It was a horror-themed affair. I had a fake hatchet and a hockey mask. My lovely wife dressed as Elvira, and she had the body for it. The only thing frightening about it was how sexy she was. My daughter, my father-in-law, who's a tattoo artist, was wearing a 3-piece suit and carrying a briefcase. The other kids wanted to know who he was. "He's the scariest man I've ever met," she replied. She won first prize for the costume, and that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.